Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. Joined today with Owen. We're going to be diving into some safeties here in a few minutes. But before we do that, Owen, are you recovering from the Bills' loss to Atlanta?
Yeah, I was watching it while I was game planning because we have our last game of the season on it tomorrow. And so while I was watching the Bills game, I was game planning for our final game here. So I wasn't too locked in. Weirdly enough, for me, this whole regular season's kind of felt like kind of the preamble for the postseason. So nothing's really hit me nearly as home. I was also taking my victory lap over my takes about Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans after his firing this week because I was always on board. Cam Moore was always my guy, especially after his first year at Washington State. But I was also very anti-Brian Callahan, especially, and I always thought Cam Moore was the guy to go at number one overall, but maybe not to the Tennessee Titans, and because of that pairing. And I felt very vindicated after the way the season has gone so far, and then now that he's the first head coach of the season off the board. So we take the victories where we can get them.
Yeah, so it feels like the first 6 weeks of the NFL regular season are preseason games that count. Meaning if the team isn't playing well, there's still time to fix it. There's just more urgency to fix things. So, I guess I just say that because one of the advantages of running draft professors and things is that I'm not watching a lot of the other, let's say, doom and gloom Bills podcasts where everybody's panicking. I'm like, it's 6 games. We have a bye. We'll be okay coming out of the bye.
Yeah. I think we'll be okay.
That's the way my brain is programmed to think. That being said, we're here to discuss some safeties. And TJ Metcalf may not be a safety, but we'll talk about that when we get to him. Bishop Fitzgerald from USC, Rod Moore from Michigan, Bray Hubbard from Alabama, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo, Bud Clark from TCU, Cole Wisniewski from Texas Tech, Robert Spears-Jennings from Oklahoma, and Genesis Smith from Arizona. So a couple questions, Owen. How many of these guys had you not watched until we were planning for the podcast?
Well, so we'll discount Genesis Smith because he was supposed to be someone we touched on last week. But between the rest of these guys, I watched TJ Metcalf because we previewed the Michigan game or the Michigan team this past season, as well as Rod Moore. I've watched Emmanuel McNeil-Warren because me and you did the full conference preview of the MAC. And as well as I was there for the Oklahoma preview, so I've gotten eyes on the Robert Spears-Jennings previously. So of those are the guys I had kind of notes on previously, and we're just kind of updating my watch, getting some 2025 tape in there because specifically when we were doing those previews, that was over the summer where we didn't have much of the new information that we currently have, especially on their new teams, like with TJ Metcalf transferring over to Michigan from Arkansas. So you have very limited reps at Arkansas where you can see TJ Metcalf and how he plays, and even to some extent Rod Moore as well, where he's on a totally different Michigan team, having missed last season with an injury. So a lot of these guys, you're seeing them, even though we previewed them, I saw them with new eyes because they're in new situations, new teams, or new entirely different schematics with which they played in compared to where they were previously.
Cool. Well, so the first player we're going to cover is TJ Metcalf. What did you see with TJ Metcalf from Michigan?
So real quick, just to answer the question that's probably most prevalent is the last name Metcalf, not the most common out there. And he is the cousin of DK Metcalf, the current wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he has that NFL bloodlines in him, and he's definitely – I don't know if I'd say he's the same special talent as his cousin is, because, rarely, if ever, do you find someone who is a DK Metcalf level talent athlete. But for me, TJ is definitely twitchy enough and you can definitely tell he's an NFL level athlete at some points, especially in the short area quickness, explosiveness, ability to cover that shorter ground. at safety, or where he's been played a lot of, especially since his move to Michigan, which is slot corner, which a lot of these players we're going to talk about today, you're going to hear me talk about them as slot corners specifically, a couple of these guys specifically here in today's episode. And we didn't really mention it a whole ton last week when we covered another group of safeties. But for this week, especially, there's a handful of guys that I have that are going to be considered or the best fits at slot corner. So yeah, TJ Metcalf, really quick twitch athlete, likes to play physical, fly around, will drop his shoulder, especially when he is closer to the line of scrimmage. You see Michigan, they run that slot big nickel type player a lot, and that is because they have. They like to have three safeties in the field, guys who can come up and support the run while also having cover responsibilities there. And specifically when looking at TJ, who's in more of a starter's role this year at Michigan, which is why he's kind of getting the spotlight this year. He has 26 total tackles. Now he has a 16% missed tackle rate, which isn't great. You want that around like 8% or lower, especially if you're going to be a slot corner. But as a guy who's 6'1", 200 pounds and has that quick twitch ability, putting him closer to the line of scrimmage to mix and match with some of these lower area zones, step up and defend the run, and then if he's going to be a man, be kind of on these more quicker, short route slots or tight ends, as opposed to having to carry and turn and run with guys up the field. So for me, he projects best as a slot corner, which I'm sure is going to be a question we expound upon in a minute here, Jim, with how you kind of introduced him. But with his skill set overall, I think projects the best there, despite him being kind of a bigger sized guy that you would maybe hope to could be more of a rangy guy in the back end. But I just don't see that all around deep speed that really allows him to transition to a consistent, even like split safety in the NFL. I think he's working closer towards the line of scrimmage is where he seemed the most comfortable now in his college career.
Yeah, he was put in a category. Like I asked for what players do we not know if they're safety, slot corner. He was put into that category, right? So he was that. So we cover him with the corners, and we're covering him with the safeties, right? He got put into both, but you're definitely saying slot corner, not safety.
If I was to draft him, I would put him there specifically. I would draft him to be a slot corner. If I'm a team that is in need of a safety, he's not my go-to guy, even amongst the group of we have today, to look and be a solution for a safety spot. If I have a spot where, very similar to how I viewed like a Jordan Hancock last year, where he's more of an athlete, he has athleticism in certain spots, but the fact that he is limited in other areas that you want in your traditional safeties makes me think, okay, not anything against like his talent or ability to play zone coverage, especially deep with his instincts. It's just more so I think his most comfortable position would be a slot. So I'm not targeting him as a safety other than putting him in the slot. Okay.
There was also a reason he was listed first. So next player, Bishop Fitzgerald from USC. This was not a player that we were aware of during the summer, but my understanding is he is having a great year for USC. What did you see?
Yeah, he's someone that I also think is having a phenomenal year, a good enough year to make him stand out for this exercise specifically. So he's going to be out of eligibility after this season. So he's going to be a guy that's come out regardless. And when you're looking at sizes and physical profiles of safeties, it's a very wide-ranging position. So looking at a guy who's 5'11", 205, which we just got done talking about, Metcalf, who's 6'1", 200, they are differently built, and you would think Fitzgerald's a bit more compact, but I definitely go with Fitzgerald being the more leaner player, just looking like he plays a lot leaner than his size. He has good range, can move sideline to sideline, but I wouldn't call that like super elite when it comes to his talents. For me, where I love him is he is able to kind of be a turnover machine, have those natural instincts in coverage to fly to the ball, make plays on the ball, have hands, high point, make those turnover plays, while also not sacrificing a ton when it comes to the tackling aspects of safety, which is a very important part of the position where you're asked a lot of times to buzz down, be an additional defender in the box, whether it's because you're replacing a blitzer who's at the actual linebacker level, or you're just asked to be the more strong safety half of a split safety zone, which I do think is what his projection would be as a split safety, not so much as a single high or anything like that. I do think his run defending in general is kind of weaker. And when we talk about the difference between run defending and tackling as a safety, is when you're looking at tackling, it's how willing is he to play physical, get his nose in there, hit guys, his form tackling, stuff like that. Run defending, especially for safeties, is going to be run angles from depth, ability to be in the box and flow down and be more of like a additional linebacker type. Can he be a more versatile piece as a run defender specifically? And then how does he attack the run from space specifically? So for Fitzgerald, I don't think his run angles are particularly great. When he's on the deeper end of it, he's a bit lean. When he's in the box, he struggles to get off of blocks, especially even like when he's going against a receiver. But when he's asked to be one-on-one with a ball carrier in space and shoot and make the tackle, I do like his tackling form a lot. So for me, he's a guy that brings that kind of more rare element to a player you project more so as like a free safety type because of his limitations in run defending and his ability to get over the top and make plays on the ball. But he does have that extra element of being able to be a sure-handed tackler. And if you have him as your last line of defense, you're not really worried about him fitting up in space and making those like touchdown-saving tackles.
Is your grade draftable on Bishop Fitzgerald?
100%. He's actually one of the higher graded players of this group that I've watched today. A lot of this exercise has been a lot of day 3 guys, and when putting him through my positional value filter, he drops down to an early day 3 grade. But off of film alone, he's around 3 grade. But especially off of this year, I didn't go back and watch some of the older film, but this year's film specifically I have is around 3 grade. But with the fact that I put the safety position as a lower valued position, I could definitely see him drafted as like 4th, 5th round type player where you're looking for a guy who can definitely has the skill set to eventually be a starting safety in the NFL.
Okay. So next player, I remember when we covered Rod Moore over the summer. This was a player we wanted to do another look at. What did your new look on Rod Moore with 2026 tape tell you?
So first off, a lot longer hair. I was really thrown off because I was trying to find him based on what I saw previously, and then he's definitely, you can see the dreads in the picture here, but he's definitely grown them out a bit more where it covers like his back plate and stuff. Makes it kind of easy to spot when you're looking at the wide zoomed out all 22 film. But I was a massive fan of Rod Moore when we did the summer scouting. Now he tore his ACL, or I think it was his ACL, something torn up his knee back in 2024. Or 2023, so he missed all of last season. And this season he came back, and he's been kind of a slow coming along. He only played 19 snaps against Wisconsin. He played a full game this most recent week. I believe it was against, if I recall correctly. Actually, I'll just pull it up before I just make a guess. But it wasn't a phenomenal great game for Michigan. USC, right? USC. So he played fully against USC after slowly coming along against Wisconsin and Nebraska. He played 18 snaps and then finally 47 against USC. So he's finally recovered from that knee. And even in the games he did play in the limited action you saw a lot of burst and a lot of speed that you maybe were worried he would have lost a step in with his injury. I do think what I saw on tape previously was that he was more of a sure-handed tackler, somebody who can, while playing with speed, still break down and make good tackles. I think he's still trying to catch up to his speed specifically in that area. So there's stuff that you saw on film previously, like when he was locking up Keon Coleman at Michigan State or making big plays in Michigan's defense, chipping in for their national title-winning defense. Like he was definitely someone who I was picturing as being like a round 2 type player or skill set at least. And when the knee injury came out and he missed all of last season, it definitely hampered what I was expecting of him for this year, but I still had hopes of the highs I saw in the previous film. And from what you see so far, he's still explosive. He's still quick twitch. A lot of the athleticism marks, you're happy he didn't lose yet. It's just more so I think he needs to catch up to the speed of the game because he is making those plays that if maybe he was still had that last year of experience and not having that speed bump, he would have made some more impact splash plays for Michigan defense that really needs it right now.
Okay. Well, I'm interested to hear what your end of season eval is because
what? Basically, you just evaluated him 3 games coming off of a 1-year knee reconstruction.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and he's still impressed. He's the guy that, as we opened this up talking about our Bills loss to the Falcons, as a team that is in need of more of a free safety type that can cover sideline to sideline, has that speed, but isn't afraid to stick his nose in and attack the run to complement their other strong safety, Cole Bishop. He's a guy that I've pegged already as, like, if we get him, he's one of the guys that I like the tape enough that I'm willing to go to bat for him as, like, a 2nd-round pick for the Bills specifically because they have that split safety, free safety need there.
Yep. Okay, next safety, Bray Hubbard from Alabama. So he was a favorite from summer scouting. Like whenever anybody did a safety big board, he was in the top 5. Is he maintaining that? Like where do you see Bray Hubbard right now in the safety class?
Talk about the polar opposite of the player we just talked about in Rod Moore, kind of a guy who's explosive, flies around the field. There's more of that free safety type player. You saw that reflected in his size, sub 200 pounds. Bray Hubbard, 6'2", 213, is basically an additional linebacker for Alabama's defense this year. A lot of his plays come with him buzzed down a line of scrimmage. I actually really like him as potentially a big nickel slot player. Not specifically maybe I wouldn't call him like your traditional slot corner because he is a bit of a bigger guy and he can have some range. But for me, his best film was him playing closer to the line of scrimmage, being like a sub-package linebacker type that could attack in the lower zones, fill runs, be aggressive, really hit. Big-time special teams guy, which is going to be a big thing, especially for the safety position. I wasn't in love with his overall film. I think he had, when it comes to athleticism, good burst and ability to have the instincts to track over the top. And I wouldn't really question a ton of his ability to cover in zone, especially in the short area in the closer to the line of scrimmage where he is lined up right now in Alabama. I think they're utilizing him in the best way he can be utilized. I don't think there's a lot more to untap with positional flexibility when you get to the NFL, which for me makes him be a bit lower for me on my big board because as a guy that you're looking at to be more of a pigeonhole player on defense, but can be a core special teamer for you in the NFL who could fly down, make tackles on kick return or kick off, punt return blocker, kick return blocker. He's done it all for Alabama. And I do think he has some natural athleticism to him. He's a very competitive player, aggressive. I just question, for me, his ability to have that higher end athleticism in man coverage, to turn around with receivers, or if he's going to be a free safety type. He's going to probably have to be a split safety, strong safety, if he's not buzzed down playing in the slot, where you can maximize his ability to play the run, as well as more of that quick twitch over long speed type athleticism. So he has upside of maybe potentially a split strong safety starter. At worst, you're getting a core special teamer who you could either put in the slot potentially, maybe as a dime linebacker early on, and then if he develops into a starting split safety, I'm not throwing that out of the picture in the slightest, but he's nowhere near. I don't think he could be knocking on, especially in the strong safety class for me, the top 5 right now.
Okay. So one of your MAC guys, and I think this is a player, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo, that is shooting up draft boards. How high do you have him graded?
So as of right now, I have him as the highest day 3 grade I can give any player before he gets into a round 3 grade. So I'm very high on him, and it was the same exact grade I gave him in the summer. For people who have him shooting up their boards, I think they just didn't get a lot of looks at him before the season started. Now, again, we did the MAC episode, and when we did that, you told me, this is the dude that if anyone's going to peg a guy to come out of the MAC this year, it's Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. And I watched him, and I was like, yeah, this is easily the highest graded player right now in the MAC that I had. And that's coming from me as a big fan of some of the other players that are in the MAC this year as draftable players. But going back and now watching him against a Kentucky from this year, watching that 2025 tape to kind of update his grade, he's continued to grow and compound on what he did well in the summer scouting process, where he is got some size, 6'2", 202, is able to buzz down and play in the box and attack the run from that second level type of depth, and be more of a sure-handed tackler. Now, there are some plays where he's dropping his head and he can miss some tackles, but for the most part, I do think he's a solid tackling option. What you're really looking forward to, and what I think the fact that he plays at Toledo, and Toledo as one of the MAC schools that branches out more so than others when it comes to playing higher level competition. Like, they played Western Kentucky 2 years in a row now. They played Kentucky this year. They played Mississippi State last year. Whenever Toledo goes and plays these higher level schools, you're looking at, can they match up and play at that level of competition? And he's one of those players that transcends that and kind of shakes off he's only good because he's in the MAC title. When he plays against these higher level schools, you can see he still does fit in. He's able to be a ball hawk, great ball skills, able to attack underneath. When him and Quinyon Mitchell were both starting for this Toledo defense, it was actually some insane film, especially against some of these higher level offenses. So for me, he keeps in stride with where he's at. I do think he can continue to get better. If he cleans up some of the smaller technical stuff when it comes to tackling and other things like that. But like, for the most part, the major questions you have around MAC players is, can they hold up athletically outside of the MAC? And for me, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren has great instincts when it comes to being a pass defender and finding the ball and attacking it and getting takeaways for your defense, which safeties are more than any other position. What you really want is a guy who can have a nose for that football, because they have kind of the field in front of them and they can attack that. And he really takes a big advantage of that by undercutting the ball a lot in zone coverage. But yeah, he holds up athletically at the next level, and just some of the more technique stuff, smaller stuff is what you can tinker with, which makes you feel pretty good about drafting out of a lower level conference.
That's good to hear. And do you project him? Maybe I missed part of it. Do you project him to be able to play single high, or is he a split safety?
So I do think his athleticism is better than like your typical, the MAC guy who's good against lower level competition, but when he gets against faster guys, he's not going to be able to compete well. I do think it's better than that. I wouldn't say he's your traditional single high, range from sideline to sideline, free safety type player. He has enough twitch and long speed to carry guys vertically. I do think he's a bit stiff in the hips. So if you ask him to play man coverage, it's going to be a bit of an issue. So for me, and a lot of times making it a split safety look just always makes it easier on safeties. So for me, I think putting that split safety will make him his best possible version of himself. I think if you threw him at midfield safety to see if he can fail out of that, if you have that kind of look in your defense, you're not going to hate him for that role. But for me, as a split safety, more the free safety half of that, I think that's where he's going to excel the most specifically. So I wouldn't say he's not a single high free safety. Having him be a split safety is probably going to be best for his opportunities to start in the NFL rather quickly.
Okay. So this is an Anthony Russo favorite, and I remember seeing a pick six from Bud Clark. I believe it was week 1 against North Carolina. I remember watching that game live. What did you think of Bud Clark?
He's an interesting one. One of the last few remnants of players that are still holding on to that 2020 COVID year extra eligibility. He's a 6-year senior because of that. He's in his 6th season at TCU specifically. And yes, you were right that he had that pick six early on in that North Carolina game where he is off coverage, is able to plant and drive from his safety position and undercut a mid-level out, jump it, run it back for a touchdown, and really kind of start the pouring on in that game against North Carolina. And that play, I think, exemplifies everything you love about Bud Clark, where he shows this ability to plant and drive and attack in zone coverage, have that twitch to change direction, and then show off some of those athletic upsides you'd expect from a guy who's recruited to a TCU team that was good when they recruited him. Back when he was recruited, they were just coming off or around that time when they were going to the national championship or in the playoffs that year. So he comes to that team, is a multi-year starter for them, And like you said, early on in the season, jumps out to it and has good size, 6'2", 190, plays super physical, is a guy that even though he's sub 200, hover around 190, and we always kind of take those numbers with a grain of salt, so I'd assume more of like a 180 type. He plays a lot bigger than that size, where he's coming up, willing to be a big hitter, wrap up, drive guys back, be a contributor in the run defense. For me, I think he's a bit, and which is weird for a 6-year senior, a bit raw in coverage. His worst plays are when he's biting on some action in front of him, or he's got his eyes in the backfield and he doesn't feel out the route behind him in the zone. Especially with some of those touchdown passes he's given up so far in his career, where he hasn't really taken a giant step forward with feeling that out behind him. But for me, if he's able to keep things in front of him and then plant and drive on it, I do think he is a strong player with his eyes, be able to read through different route combinations and has a knack for playing the ball, has great ball skills. Even when he isn't jumping and making picks, he's getting knockdowns. He has some good vertical ability to take away some throwing windows that maybe would be open with other lesser athletes at safety. He can really get up there and knock some passes down. So for me, I'm a big fan of Bud Clark. I wouldn't say he's my absolute favorite player in this class, especially when we talk about like even this episode like Rod Moore. But I do think he is of this group. If you take Rod Moore out of this group, he is the highest graded player I've watched of them specifically because of this season and some of the high level plays he makes with taking away the football.
So you have a day 2 grade on Bud Clark?
I as of right now, I do, yes.
Okay. And the reason why I know that is that you had the highest day 3 grade on Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. So if he's higher than that, I knew he had to be day 2. That's just me doing math.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, he is
okay.
with when adding in the positional multiplier. I'll find it real quick for you because he's right above where Terry Moore is. He is, a 3rd round grade for me, safely in that 3rd round grade range. So he's a guy that I think he's finally getting that recognition. And if he can keep kind of improving some of these other things, like I said, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where if you have the athletic ability and the knack to get the football, I can work with some of the other stuff to build you up.
Okay. Next player, Cole Wisniewski from Texas Tech. And this was your first watch of Cole Wisniewski, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So what did you think?
Can I ask, so was he someone recommended, or was this kind of more of a buzz thing where you got him from what other draft professors were talking about when it comes to their top safety boards?
Bill Sparks really liked him.
He definitely seems like a Bill Sparks player. I'll give him that. He is a transfer, was at North Dakota State for the past 4 seasons. Now he's in his 5th year as a senior. For me, this was when we were in the pre-show. I was talking about how there was one player I just wasn't there at all with him, and this is the guy. 6'4", 220, kind of similar we talked about with Alabama safety. I'm always flying through names. Yes, Hubbard. We talked about a lot how he is the close to the line of scrimmage, dime linebacker, second-level player who excels in those lower areas. And I think for me, Wisniewski, he's a bit better as a deep safety than a Hubbard for me personally. But when looking at his style of play and his transition from North Dakota State to Texas Tech so far this season, he hasn't really taken that step as an all-around athlete that, say, a player who was originally recruited into Alabama, as Hubbard was, has. Like, I think Hubbard has some question marks about some traditional athleticism that you need to play safety in the NFL, but I do think he's an overall good athlete. Wisniewski was a good athlete at North Dakota State, had 8 interceptions his final season there, and you can see that in the film. Like, some of them are just bad balls thrown, playing against sub-level quarterback competition, but a lot of them are also like him taking with the football, breaking on balls, making good athletic plays. And similar to what we talked about with the MAC, but even more so when you're at like a North Dakota State, an FCS school, it's can that athleticism translate against higher level competition? And he transfers to Texas Tech, which is higher level school, and he has the size, and that kind of helps him with his range a bit because if you have that extra length, you don't have to be nearly as fast to cover as much ground because you have some extra range and length that the quarterback isn't accounting for. So it helps you cheat a little bit. So you don't have to be the fastest guy to play as a deep safety. But for me, with him, even when he does have that going with his advantage or in his advantage, he still struggles to have that range or athleticism, kind of the opposite of we talked about with the Bud Clark, where you're asking him to plant, drive, and cover a lot of ground as a deeper safety to make some of these plays that even in North Dakota State he was still making. But when he goes out to Texas Tech and is playing against like an Oklahoma or whichever teams they ended up playing this year, I forget which game it was that he really struggled. I think it was SMU. He really struggled as a space defender when it came to outbreaking routes as a deep safety with giving cushion that you maybe would hope for with a guy that you're hoping has like that extra size. He can cover more ground. But where he does really succeed as a lower level defender, playing in those shorter hook zones where he can be more of a twitchy player, fill up, run defend, had a couple of missed tackles against like Utah. But for the most part, it's not because his technique was bad. It was just more so good plays by the offensive player. So if you're looking for a sure-handed guy that can play close to the line of scrimmage while still having some coverage chops and ability to take the ball away, at least has shown it at the lower level, maybe not as much so far at Texas Tech, he's a guy you can look at. But for me, this is another guy where it's like, does he play more of that slot, big nickel role because you want him closer to the line of scrimmage to be a run defender and you want to take away some of the stuff that he does not as well, which is deep zone coverages and working in that much space. If you limit the amount of spaces in, can he be a better overall player? For me, when I have those guys, those are the roles I'm looking at. So for Cole Wisniewski, even more so than we talked about earlier with Hubbard, I think he could probably be more of your sub linebacker slot corner type when most people probably aren't looking at that as the traditional body size for that position.
And I look at the body size. Would you ever project him to linebacker, or you would just call him a box safety? What's your mindset there?
I am more willing to project him to like a weak side linebacker than I am to being a traditional box safety at the NFL level. Like, so even when you are a strong safety in a split backfield, you still need to be able to cover enough ground, especially in run defense where you're running lanes and having to make tackles and fit the run from 15, 20 yards off the ball several times in the game. For me, Wisniewski plays a lot better when he's closer in that 10 to 3 yard range, with the linebacker depth that we talk about, or slot corner depth. So if you want to have him make the full-on transition to linebacker, I think he projects to the NFL better there than he would if you're trying to ask him to be more of a strong safety type projection in the NFL level.
Okay. I love that breakdown. I don't know that I had heard that breakdown on Cole Wisniewski before. So Robert Spears-Jennings, like, you had me pretty pumped up for him when we covered the Oklahoma podcast over the summer. What did you see when you put on 2025 Oklahoma tape?
It was a lot of the same stuff that you saw in the more limited action he got in the previous seasons beforehand. So just to give a frame of reference, I know there was a lot of these Oklahoma defenders where it was like, okay, they need to step up and have some more opportunity. He played 600 snaps last year, so he was more of the consistent contributors. But before that, it was 241 and 75. So 2024 was his first like real opportunity to grab a starting role and hold on to it. So far in 2025, he has 224 snaps in 6 games, week 1 through 7. He does a lot of the stuff that you saw last year where he has athleticism, he's able to fly down the ball, has that size with 6 foot 213. But unlike Hubbard or Wisniewski, who we talked about previously, where I'm talking about them as guys that can kind of fly around and make plays, and is in so far over that 210 mark, he is someone that I do believe could be more of a sideline-to-sideline player and has that athleticism to cover more ground than some of these other guys. So for me, despite the fact that, you know, he's not as big as Wisniewski or as thick and good inside the box as a Hubbard is, and he still is really lacking that production when it comes to coverage. So he has 1 interception in 2024 with only 1 other forced incompletion that season. And then other than that, he only has 1 other forced incompletion according to PFF the rest of his career. He's not really making plays on the ball itself, which was kind of like, I think it was Miles Scott last week, where He's a guy who can fly around, can really impact the run from safety depth, but hasn't made those plays in the pass game that you're really looking for when it jumps out to you to be a day 2 safety, to be an early day 3 safety. So Spears-Jennings, as an athlete, that if you put him at your free safety spot, you can still be confident that you'll have a solid run defender from that depth. He isn't translating to other elements of like a free safety type or even like a split strong safety type that you want, which is attacking that ball and making that production.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, flashback to last week. Robert Spears-Jennings or Zakee Wheatley? Who do you have graded higher?
So Zakee Wheatley was an interesting watch from last week. If anybody watching this week didn't watch last week, Zakee Wheatley was like the super freak guy from Penn State that was like a heat-seeking missile at the safety depth, but couldn't really do a lot of coverage responsibility. And I personally have Robert Spears-Jennings and him in a similar bucket of player just because Wheatley is so unproven as a coverage player, but has those uber talented elements that make him be more push up the board when it comes to those athleticisms. I don't have a ton of questions about Spears-Jennings' athleticism. I think he's a bit better of a coverage player, obviously. Maybe just doesn't have the ball skills that some of these other safeties talked about today have. I think I would have, or I can tell you for certain, I have Wheatley graded ahead of Spears-Jennings just because that body composition, athletic build can overcompensate for a lot of other things where you, when just breaking down how I grade safeties, there are like 3 different combinations of things that come up when it comes to athleticism, athletic traits, or ability to be physical with size and tackling, whereas coverage is 2 elements of it. And the fact that Wheatley was able to cover more ground with that because he is an elite athlete to size ratio, I would much rather take a gamble on him in day 3 than I would a Robert Spears-Jennings. Not saying anything against Spears-Jennings. I think he's a solid player that could be one of those guys you draft in day 3 and is more of a steal, kind of what we saw with like a Cameron Curl or some of these other safeties that end up being starters despite being round 6, round 7 picks. I have him graded a little bit higher than that, but you can still see that similar area where he gets picked, not really having a ton of expectations, but because he's so solid overall, but maybe not unspectacular in his overall profile, that he can get a role in the NFL but not be highly touted as a draft prospect.
Okay. So that's interesting that I could listen to you, and I didn't know they were in the same tier until you answered the question, but that is one of my gifts. I'm at the edge of my seat listening to you. So Genesis Smith, and he's a safety, not a corner. I got to update the screen there. But we were supposed to cover him last week, and I ended the podcast before we covered him. So we're going to cover him now. He was not a player that I heard about over the summer. So this is like a breakout year for him, and I know several people at the Draft Professor really like him. But what did you think of Genesis Smith?
He was one of my favorite watches of last week. Now, maybe not highest graded players, because we had some good players last week and this week. But for a player that has done a lot for Arizona, and the fact that you have him listed as a cornerback isn't totally off base because he played a ton of slot corner last season. He's one of those guys that you watch him and you just get excited to watch him play football. He's more on the leaner side. I didn't really look at him and think he was like this big, bulky guy. You know, he's 6'2", 200 plus pounds. But he is very solid when it comes to his coverage responsibilities, ability to attack the ball, create those turnovers. His awesome habit is coming on and trying to participate with me on the podcast. He's always got something to say about whenever I come on here and I start talking with Jim. But for me, Genesis Smith was a guy who always had a nose for the football. He had an interception this year, had 3 last year with 2 dropped interceptions. Is really kind of more of a natural for the position, despite not having been a traditional safety a lot until this year, where he has already more snaps at free safety this year than he has in any other season combined. So he's in more of a natural safety position now, kind of similar to what we talked about. Again, terrible with recollection of names, but the Maryland safety from last. Yes, Husky.
Jalen Husky.
More of a corner type, and then made the transition to safety because He runs around, flies around, and plays very physical, despite his size limitations, as in being a little bit leaner, but still retains those ball hawking notions, responsibility and coverage, especially zone. And you can definitely see that, like, the team saw that he was more of a guy that can play in between the two hashes and be more of a physical run defender at depth. That you'd want him to be more involved as a safety as opposed to corners, which are usually outside of the run plays if it's run to the opposite side of the field or anything like that. So he's a guy that maybe can break in as a slot corner type because he's experienced doing that, but his mentality for the position and still some of the other elements of the game, I do think have him be projected more as a safety in the NFL, and he, again, very fun, flashy type player that can round out his game a bit more being new to the position and could be a guy who rises by this time end of the season.
And is your current grade on him day 2 or day 3?
High day 3, but I do think by the time the end of the season comes around, he'll be in that day 2 bucket for me. I really did like his tape a ton.
Okay. And that was the list from last week, so we don't need to do that. So at this point, Owen has podcasted 16 safeties, right? We did 8 last week. We did 8 this week. There were still 8 that we have not gotten to. So let's see if I can get that list. Is that this one? Yeah, so the list that we haven't podcasted on is Amari Farrell from Indiana, Caleb Downs from Ohio State, Kamari Ramsey from USC, Dylan Thieneman from Oregon, VJ Payne from Kansas State, Jalen Kilgore from South Carolina, Tao Johnson from Utah, and Keon Sabb from Alabama. So there's still 8 more that would give us 24 safeties, and on average, only 17 get drafted. So, and Owen, out of the 16 we've podcasted on so far, did you have an undraftable grade on any of them?
I didn't. Even with the positional multiplier, I have them all as draftable grades. The lowest one that we talked about of those 16 is Peyton Bowen, and then Wisniewski is above him specifically for me. Those guys, though, it's also because I'm not as high on maybe some skill set stuff and the limitations they have in their game, because both those guys specifically are those strong safety types, can run down and play. Wisniewski especially, I think maybe he's playing the wrong position. If I evaluate him as like a more linebacker type, even Hubbard to an extent, if you ask me to evaluate them as linebackers, I may come back with a higher grade on them. They're probably definitely Wisniewski because he has already the size there. Hubbard, you'd be asking him to pack on so much more weight. But Wisniewski's already at 220, 6'4". That could be a guy that if I went back and didn't, like, when I have free time at the end of the cycle, when I go back and watch him with a linebacker lens, he may be able to get even higher up in the grades, but none of them are undraftable players for me.
Yep. And then there were still also a lot of safeties that didn't even make the cut for that 24, right? Because there's like Isaiah Nakobia from SMU who wasn't included in that list of 24. So I could still throw out several more names that some people have talked about on some of the other podcasts, but I love what you've done with the 16 safeties that you've covered already. So
yeah, even so from our summer scouting, some of the other guys I've watched, well, okay, not from our summer scouting, but just because I've watched them for 4 years, I might as well throw his name out. Jalen Catalon, now at Missouri. And then someone else who I'm really high on, who's actually higher than a couple of the guys we talked about, and we're talking about slot safeties, Khalil Barnes from Clemson, a couple guys that, like, we talked about 24 names, and those are another, like, 2 guys I have draftable grades on. That's like, okay, I don't know if some of these guys are being announced as corners in the draft or if some of these guys don't come out, but your number, what was the number you had that was amount of safeties drafted? I think I'm hammering the over on that for this upcoming draft cycle, specifically just with the guys that are out of eligibility and some of the undergraduates that are going to be coming out.
Yeah, so I know next week Newt is back. So I've been looking forward to chatting with Newt for a while. So it's good. Out of all of the podcasters that we started with last year,
you and Newt are the only pair that is still intact. And then obviously Randall is back and Anthony Russo is podcasting with us still. But like, it's just those four from the OG. So.
I mean, listen, when you have as much disagreement, it's fun to always come back with somebody that you're like, okay, I'm at least going to get into one debate per show about a player that we talk about in this group of 8. So it's always nice to have that kind of attraction with the two hosts there. So I'm not surprised that we've made it back again for another cycle here.
Yep. So you want to let everybody know about the weekly huddle and all the other content that you make?
Yeah, so I'm currently over at Weekly Huddle on YouTube. I know I haven't been posting at all whatsoever besides like reposting these live streams that we do simultaneously. But I do have a lot of content over there. I was putting out a lot of content over the summer. Hopefully, once my football coaching season wraps up, I'll be able to get toward more content out on that channel, especially as we get ramped up more towards All-Star Circuit and the draft and everything like that. I'll definitely have some more content over there ramping up as well, talking about the draft and maybe some other sports takes or Bills takes or whatever, just from whatever I feel like posting on that channel. But it's going to be we're always having a twist back or a tie back to the draft or college football in some way, as well as you can find me over on Twitter at Weekly Huddle. And on both those things, you can definitely see my advertisements for when I eventually, again, get back to posting regularly. I'm going to be doing some live watch-alongs for scouting film. And then if you missed the live streams, you can go over to the Patreon and pay, I think it's like $1 a month I have right now as a tier to go back and watch those VODs and catch me watching and reacting to these players' film live, along with whoever is there live with me and answering questions about that and just giving my live thoughts as we go through and watch the clips together. So that's what you can find over at the Patreon for Weekly Huddle.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and doing this with Draft Professor. And I have to remind myself to go check out when you're breaking down the film. So
yeah. I'll make sure to post it. We have if you sign up for the Draft Professor or you get in with us here, you get access to a lot of other cool guys and a bunch of group chats in the Discord. And I'll definitely be posting whenever I do go live in those group chats to try to get some of that engagement up. So you'll be reminded about it as soon as I get that back up and running.
Cool. Well, welcome to Draft Professor, everybody. My name's Jim. You can follow all of my content at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It's the same on YouTube as it is on X. That is the Draft Professor Twitter and YouTube page. We're here every day with draft content. And the content from now for the rest of the calendar year is breaking down players the same way Owen just did with 9 safeties. We're going to be doing that every position group. So starting next week, you can catch Owen twice. Owen will be Tuesday nights covering offensive line at 9 p.m. with Buffalo Bills retired offensive lineman Jerry Ostrowski. And then Owen and Newt will be here Wednesday nights breaking down the defensive line class. So each podcast is going to cover 8 players. If you want to know which 8 players, go back to what I said at the beginning. Follow at NFL Draft Fanatic. It's announced on Twitter every morning which players are being covered on that night's podcast. And if you want the list of players ahead of time, you just need to message me. I've got spreadsheets that hit the lists of players and stuff like that. For Owen, myself, for the 100 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.